A crane operator named Yusuf sits inside a glass cabin 70 meters above the desert floor. He has been working the Al Maktoum International Airport expansion site since 2022. This morning, his crane is still. The equipment below him is still. The entire construction zone, which stretches across an area larger than the island of Manhattan, is still. Not because of a sandstorm, not because of a holiday, because the question of whether any of it makes economic sense has finally caught up with the ambition that started it, Al Maktoum International Airport. The project, designed to process 260 million passengers per year, more than any airport on Earth has ever handled. A structure so large it would make Heathrow look like a regional terminal. A project officially priced at $35 billion, though the real number, when you follow the infrastructure threads outward into roads, utilities, freight zones, and city planning, reaches figures that no official press release will confirm. And yet, here in 2025, with one concourse partially operational and the surrounding desert largely empty, the question that the architects of this project never wanted anyone to ask is now unavoidable. What happens when a city builds the world's largest airport for a future that may never arrive in the form the city imagined? This is not a story about construction delays. Construction delays are boring. This is a story about a system built on an assumption, and what that assumption was always hiding. We are going to walk through 3 layers of this: what was promised, what was built, and what the physics of global aviation are doing to everything in between. Stay until the last segment. What you find there will reframe everything that came before it. The kind of person who watches this until the end already understands that the most dangerous infrastructure is not the kind that collapses. It is the kind that stands perfectly for all the wrong reasons. If that sounds like your frequency, you are in the right place. Al Maktoum International, known formerly as Dubai World Central, sits in the Jebel Ali district, roughly 40 kilometers southwest of the current Dubai International Airport. It was conceived in the mid-2000s, when Dubai International was already showing signs of saturation. Even then, the vision was not simply a relief valve for an overcrowded terminal. It was a declaration. The ambition was to relocate every single international operation from Dubai International to Al Maktoum by around 2027, creating a single aerotropolis that would anchor the entire economic logic of a city that does not have oil as its primary revenue driver. Dubai's leadership understood something that most governments are still reluctant to admit. Geography without connectivity is worthless, and connectivity in the 21st century means air travel. So they built for the maximum possible version of the future. The numbers at the time seemed to justify the bet. Dubai International grew from 47 million passengers in 2010 to 83 million in 2017. It became the busiest international airport in the world by passenger volume. Emirates Airline expanded relentlessly. Low-cost carriers filled every slot available. The city was not building a hub. It was becoming the hub, the single most important transfer point between East and West on the planet. In that context, 260 million passengers did not sound delusional. It sounded like prudent planning. Here is the question you should be sitting with right now. What do you build when the thing your entire infrastructure depends on, the continued exponential growth of long-haul aviation, starts bending in a direction nobody planned for? Leave that question open for now, because it gets heavier as we go deeper. The first concourse at Al Maktoum, the one that is operational today, handles mostly cargo and some low-cost passenger traffic. Its passenger capacity in its current state is approximately 26 million per year. That is about 10% of the stated end-state vision. The gap between 10% and 100% is not just an engineering gap. It is a financing gap, a demand gap, and increasingly, a physics gap. Each of the remaining phases requires sustained capital commitment over periods measured in decades. Each phase assumes that the demand projections from 2015 still hold. They do not hold in the same shape they once appeared to. Let's be precise about what changed. The International Air Transport Association revised its global aviation growth forecasts 3 separate times between 2019 and 2024. The disruption of the pandemic years was not the only variable. Structural factors entered the equation. Business travel, which historically drove the premium revenue that makes long-haul hubs economically viable, contracted by estimates ranging from 15 to 25% on a permanent basis compared to pre-pandemic trajectories. Corporate travel managers at firms in London, Frankfurt, and Singapore made permanent policy changes. Video conferencing absorbed a portion of the trips that once connected those cities to Dubai's transit corridors. Meanwhile, new long-range aircraft, specifically the Boeing 777X and the Airbus A350 variants, made direct point-to-point routes possible at scale. A passenger flying from Melbourne to London no longer needs to stop in Dubai. The aircraft can carry them past it. The hub model that built Dubai's aviation dominance is not dead, but it is under pressure from a technological direction that no airport, no matter how large, can engineer its way out of. Would you board a direct flight from your city to your destination? Or would you choose a cheaper ticket with a 2-hour layover in Dubai? Think about what your honest answer reveals about the next 20 years of this airport's business case. Drop your answer in the comments. The patterns in the responses will tell you something about the future of hub aviation more accurately than most consulting reports. Now look at what is happening on the ground level. Ahmed Al-Rashidi, a logistics coordinator who relocated his family from Cairo to Dubai in 2019, specifically because of the promised economic zone that Al Maktoum Airport would anchor, is still waiting. He took a lease on warehouse space in the Dubai South Free Zone in 2021, betting that the cargo volumes flowing through an expanded Al Maktoum would make his business viable. The full passenger terminal is not yet operational at the scale he planned for. The ecosystem of suppliers, service companies, retailers, and hospitality businesses that were supposed to organically generate around the aerotropolis have arrived at a fraction of the projected density. His lease costs the same. The customers are not the same. He is not an isolated case. He represents an entire category of medium-scale investor who made decisions based on a timeline that the project itself cannot currently honor. This is the trampoline effect of mega-project promises. The promise generates secondary investment before the primary investment delivers. When the primary investment slows, the secondary investment is already committed and has nowhere to go. The people who feel this are not the sovereign wealth funds that can absorb delays in decade-long accounting cycles. They are the Ahmeds, the ones who moved their families. The financing architecture of Al Maktoum is worth examining carefully. because it reveals the third layer of pressure on this project. Dubai does not finance its megaprojects through conventional debt markets the way a Western government would. The structure involves entities like Dubai Airports, the Investment Corporation of Dubai, and various sovereign guarantees that do not operate with the same transparency as publicly traded infrastructure bonds. What we can track through available reporting and financial disclosures is this. The total capital deployed into Al Maktoum and its surrounding Dubai South District through 2024 exceeds $11 billion. The remaining phases 2 through 5 in the official master plan, require an estimated additional $24 billion at minimum, based on unit costs from comparable global airport expansions. That $24 billion needs to come from somewhere, and the somewhere, in current global capital conditions, is not the same somewhere it was in 2015. Interest rates globally are not at the floor they occupied during the decade when Al Maktoum's expansion phases were originally costed. Infrastructure debt has become more expensive. The opportunity cost of capital has shifted. Meanwhile, competing airports in the region are not sitting still. Riyadh's King Salman International Airport project carries a budget of $7 billion and is designed for 120 million passengers per year. It is being built with the explicit strategic intent of redirecting the aviation flows that currently move through Dubai. Abu Dhabi's Zayed International Airport completed its new terminal in 2023 with significant capacity additions. Every additional seat mile of competition in the Gulf makes the demand projections for Al Maktoum incrementally harder to achieve. We are now at the part of this story where the symptom and the cause converge. Here is what that looks like. An airport built for 260 million passengers serves approximately 26 million in its operational footprint today. Every additional phase requires a decision to invest capital that is more expensive than it was when the project was designed. Every additional phase competes against a global aviation market that is structurally evolving away from the hub model the airport was designed to dominate. And every additional phase delays the return on the capital already spent, creating a compounding pressure on the entities carrying the original commitment. This is not a project in trouble because something went wrong. This is a project in trouble because the thing it assumed would stay constant did not stay constant. That distinction matters enormously because it means the solution is not an engineering fix. Sarah Hollingsworth, a senior infrastructure analyst based in London, who spent 2 years embedded with Gulf aviation consultancies between 2019 and 2021, described the situation in terms that have stayed with me. She said the project was priced in one world and is being built in a different one, and the distance between those two worlds is not measured in years, it is measured in assumptions. The assumption that premium long-haul travel would keep growing at 4% per year compounding. The assumption that point-to-point ultra-long-range routes would not scale commercially before the airport was complete. The assumption that Riyadh would not decide to compete for the same connectivity crown with the backing of a sovereign wealth fund that makes Dubai's look modest in scale. None of those assumptions were unreasonable in 2015. None of them are fully intact in 2025. What does Dubai do with this? That is not a rhetorical question. It is the operational question that the Investment Corporation of Dubai, Emirates Airlines Board, and the Emirates leadership are currently answering in real time. One pathway is continued phased investment, accepting that the full vision arrives in 2040 rather than 2030, and betting that the demand projections eventually self-fulfill because Dubai's brand and connectivity advantages compound over time. Another pathway is a strategic pivot in what the airport serves, leaning into cargo, logistics, and the physical economy of goods movement rather than passenger volume. Since the e-commerce revolution creates real structural demand for air freight capacity that is not subject to the same pressures as business travel. A third pathway, the one nobody in an official position will discuss, is a permanent reset of the ambition, building out to perhaps 60 or 80 million passengers of capacity and declaring that sufficient, while allowing the surrounding Dubai South District to develop on a longer, more organic timeline. Each of those pathways has a different implication for the $11 billion already spent. And here is where it gets philosophically uncomfortable. There is a concept in economics called the sunk cost trap, the tendency to continue investing in a direction because of what has already been spent, rather than because of what the future genuinely promises. The largest, most sophisticated sovereign capital entities in the world are not immune to this. In fact, they may be more susceptible to it, because the reputational cost of publicly reconsidering a project of this scale is itself a form of cost that cannot appear on a balance sheet. Yusuf's crane is still, not permanently. Tomorrow, it will probably move. But the question of where it is building toward, and whether the endpoint it was originally aimed at still exists in the form it was promised, that question does not resolve when the crane starts moving again. It resolves, or it does not resolve, over the next 15 years of decisions that no single engineer, no single financier, and no single government can fully control. The world's largest airport is not impossible to build. The concrete will set, the runways will be paved, the terminals will rise. What may be impossible is the world the airport was built for, and that is a different kind of impossibility, one with no structural solution, one that sits in the gap between the ambition of a city and the direction of forces it did not create and cannot redirect. The crane does not know this. It just waits. If this kind of analysis, the kind that looks past the press release and into the architecture of the assumption underneath, is what you come here for, then hitting like and subscribing is how you tell this channel to keep going in this direction. Share this with someone who is watching the Gulf's megaproject pipeline and asking the same questions out loud. The community that builds here is the reason the research keeps getting deeper. Subscribe and turn on notifications to belong to the group of people who want to understand what is actually being built before the official story decides what it means. The content of this video is based on strategic analysis reports, estimated data, and hypothetical scenarios concerning the current economic and geopolitical context. The information is provided for reference purposes, independent analysis, and documentary storytelling. It does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. The images and materials used are intended to illustrate the arguments presented.